Welcome to the Nativity Podcast, where we give listeners a behind-the-scenes look into the life of our active Catholic parish here in Burke, Virginia. How can we help you grow in your own faith? Listen to find out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nativity Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great day, and I am your host, Father Ed Bresnahan, parochial vicar of the Church of the Nativity in Burke, Virginia. With me, as always,
your director of social media, Mary Castellano,
our illustrious co-host. Hey, this is the fourth week of Lent. Can you believe it?
This is the third.
There are three kinds of people in this world. There are those who can count and those who can't. I wanted to make sure that you were on your toes. I wanted to see, because sometimes it feels like Lent is a lot longer than it really is.
Yes.
If you've ever had that moment when you look and you're like, boy, I can't wait for the weekend tomorrow, and you realize it's Tuesday. That is a great feeling. So I wanted to just make sure everybody had that feeling just right as we got started. No, for serious, everybody, we are on week 3 of Lent, and we're doing this Lenten podcast. Next week, there will be a week 4. It will not be this one. So in the meantime, each week we are coming to you with a different meditation, and we're bringing different people in on board, and we're interviewing different people around the parish to get their perspectives, to get their ideas, and to hear where they're coming from with each of the gospel readings that we're encountering. So we are continuing with that. This is week 3 of our podcast, and Mary, we have a treat today.
We're so happy. Oh my gosh.
Joining us from our beloved school,
yes,
from the Nativity Catholic School.
For the very first time.
Friends, I can't stress to you that you see us and all the wonderful people that we have presented to you, but you don't actually get to see the behind the scenes where we're calling around, asking people, having these conversations with folks, trying to figure out how to get things to fit. And we have, in the course of the Nativity Podcast, we have never been able to do this until now, but we have gotten one of our beloved teachers to come on and share some time with us. Today we welcome Janet Basselgia, our second grade teacher and all-star teacher in our school. Janet, we're glad to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
What a blessing. Now, I know that I will get this wrong because, as you can see, my numbers are off. So I'm going to trust the teacher on this one. Tell us a little bit about, like, how long have you been teaching? Have you been teaching second grade the whole time? Or, like, kind of what's the story with you in school, in our wonderful school?
Well, this is my 26th year of teaching. The first 4 years was in Memphis, Tennessee. I taught in the inner city schools. And that was a very rough experience, but I don't regret it one bit, doing those 4 years with those children, because it kind of gave me more of a sense of my faith to having them. And when they saw that every day, that's what made them want to come to school. So that was a rewarding experience for me. And then I came here. I applied for Fairfax County, the diocese. Of course, the diocese just swooped me up real quick. And to know that I was teaching at the home parish where my parents are going to, it's like, sure, why not? I'll give it a try for a couple of years. Well, here I am 22 years later, still in the same school. I've seen a lot of changes throughout the years, but I haven't taught second grade the whole time. I've taught for 9 years in first grade, and then I finally graduated to second grade. And I've been there ever since because I love teaching the Sacraments.
When I was teaching and I had gotten transferred back to a parish, I let everybody know that high school was the best 10 years of my life. So I appreciate that. So 22 years at the school,
yes,
and almost evenly split, but it looks like a little bit more on the second grade level.
Correct.
And I really, really appreciated what you said about how your time in Memphis shaped your time here, because first and second grade is such a powerfully influential set of years where young people absolutely get and respond to what you are authentically energetic about.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that you truly treasure, those the kindergarten, first and second grade, those are the years that they absolutely will pick up on it. They pick up on it in other grades.
Right.
It's so essential in those first years.
Right.
What's been some of the most rewarding, or what would you say is some of the most rewarding parts about teaching second grade?
Well, first of all, the sacraments. I mean, just getting excited for them every year. Like, this is exciting. Yes, it's going to be nerve-wracking at times, especially with reconciliation. But I assure them it's okay. Everyone comes out just fine. And then just seeing them when they do come out, like, I always tell them there's a glow on them when they come out. And I've actually had a child come out and say, "Do you see my glow? Is it all around my head? Do you see it?" So I guess that was their memorable part, where like they were waiting for me to say that I see them. So it's just rewarding just watching them. And when I get emotional, I know it's rewarding and just very loving, just with the sacrament alone. Of course, there's so many other things. I mean, just the everyday things, and just when I have children that are not, feeling well, you just want to, just hug them. And, I don't care if I catch it. It's just that they need that more than me worrying about what I'm going to, get from them. Or with the current situation in my room, that, a child will bring me joy. It's not always me bringing them joy. It's them bringing me the joy. So, and that's very rewarding. It's like, forget about that headache. Here's a kid who, going through more than I am right now. So,
yeah, and I think second grade is really just a huge step there, because, I mean, you see them walk in their little uniforms, and they are really set up as like little big students. Right. You know what I like miniature eighth graders, like miniature seventh graders, because they've got the same uniform on and everything like that. They've got their little backpacks and they've got their books, but it's so often it's the first time they've had to learn like tests and quizzes and take homework home. Right. And so it feels like it's like really a bridge between being like a little kid and wanting to just run and play in the mud and just do stuff. When they trip and fall, they run to their parents and get a Band-Aid and a kiss from a boo for a boo-boo. At the same time, kind of like, okay, got to get your desk in order and got to make good, get your homework done and figure out how to learn. And so I feel like you really get the best of both worlds in that, and be able to experience life for these little ones.
I do. And it's also teaching them a little bit more responsibility. That like they're the kind of a big kid now. Besides, they look back at the kindergarten first and they're like, "Oh, we're the big kids now." Not the big kids of the hall, but just getting that, great feeling in themselves. Like they can do this. They can be the mentor. They can be a model for someone else now. Where kindergarten first, they weren't thinking of that. They were still thinking of who picked on whom, that kind of thing. But no, I mean, second grade is very rewarding because they're making their sacrament. It's a big deal, and they take it in as a big deal. And plus a lot of other things that they learn.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your husband, Barry, is also a very big part of this parish as well.
Yes,
I always see him serving with the Knights of Columbus. It's you two are kind of like your two peas in a pod. So how long have you and Barry been married?
We've been married for 13 years. Been part of the parish together for the 13 years. When I moved here in 2002, I became a parishioner here. And when we got married, he really loved seeing what was going on in the parish. So back before we were married, he was not Catholic. So he went through the RCIA, and because he wanted our family to be together.
Wow.
And the parish. So we've loved it ever since. After that, he joined the Knights of Columbus, and he's been great. He's always busy, as you said, but we enjoy doing that because it's our service back to the parish.
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love every word of that so much.
I always hate stereotyping everything, but there really is something great about in your family and watching you guys being able to see how, I don't know how to phrase this. It's like in the church is such a big umbrella that two beautiful people can find a way to serve the church together and in their own individual ways. Mm-hmm. That the church is big enough to encapsulate all of that. Like, I think of my own parents. My mom was the sacristan. My dad used to do the accounting for the bingo, right? And it was just two very dramatically different places, but they managed to both be invested in the church and make that work. And so when I see you and Barry, right, I see like tons of little guys, right? Kindergartners, first graders, and even your former students running up to you after Mass, right? To say, hi, Mrs. Basselgia, hi, Mrs. Basselgia. And then at the same time, just, 20 feet away, there's Barry getting registrations and signups for the fish fry that is such a huge part of his life, right? And so, which, by the way, he did an amazing job, right? So just a couple weeks ago, we had a fish fry, and Nativity, there are very few places that I would rank ahead of the fish fry at Nativity. Nativity goes all out with everything you could imagine fish fry related. There's hush puppies and, different kinds of breaded fishes and things like that. It is outstanding what Nativity does.
It was him who brought the fish fry to Nativity.
It's genius.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Because when he came, and he was like, well, why aren't there fish fries during Lent? And everyone was like, oh, I don't know. He goes, well, I want to start it. And
Let's go.
He's been doing it for several years. But yes, he's the one that brought the fish fry to Nativity.
Oh, my goodness. There's a parish in Alexandria, St. Joseph's, and they do a catfish thing. And it's very cultural. It's very cultural because the parish itself is was founded by St. Catherine Drexel, with a specific care towards helping minorities in the area and everything. And there's just something about the family cookout and bringing people together. They do this catfish broil and everything like that. That's just out of this world. But Barry holds his own. That man takes care of our parish.
Yes.
So I think those two, probably in the whole Diocese of Arlington, I would put those two as the tops when it comes to fish fries. And it is an outstanding thing. I'm so grateful. Please let Barry know. And if he listens to the podcast, he'll hear. Barry, I speak for all of us at Nativity. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've done for us. But the other thing that kind of goes along with this is that it's pretty exhausting, right? There's a lot that gets involved. And sometimes, right, as much as we want to give to the church and share our love for the Lord, I'm in this boat. I know you are, Mary. And I can only assume at the end of a busy school year, at the end of a tough day at school, there's a lot of emotion and a lot of struggle and a lot of kind of a need to just,
Yes.
So my question for you guys, for everybody, is where is your happy place? Where is that place that you go for that kind of respite?
Well, mine, I would say, is more looking at mountains, because there's, when we go to Pennsylvania, we're always in the traffic and the 270 and the 70, 495, and it's just come on, let's go. But then, there's a point off Route 15, it's we come over the hill and there's the mountains ahead of me, the traffic kind of dispersed, and it's and it's not that I can go to the mountains every day or anything, but sometimes I just close my eyes and just visualize that, just to bring the peace in where it's needed, to just kind of relax and just take a deep breath and just realize that everything's fine. So my happy place is there, and I just like that calmness that it brings.
I love that. It's just a release from the past as you head towards what your next journey is. Right. Kind of just to be able to relax from that. That sounds incredible. I know that little spot on the highway on Route 15. That is incredible. Heading up past Frederick, Maryland, that you're in just a good spot. Suddenly it just doesn't feel claustrophobic. Right. And whether it's the cars around you or the buildings on the side of the highway, or just the kind of everything just kind of creeps in on you. Weird, I'm speaking on a podcast, but I'm doing my hands or making visual signs. So just in case you guys wanted to visualize what claustrophobic looks like for Father Bresnahan. So, Mary, what's your happy place?
My happy place. Oh man, it's always been the woods and forests. So growing up, I was really blessed to have some woods in my backyard. Not a huge forest, but I look out, my bedroom window, and I see trees. And I remember when I was a freshman at Catholic University in DC, I really, really missed that. There were trees on campus, but there weren't woods. There wasn't a mini forest. And so, there's just something about that nature, that quiet. It's not dead silent, because there are natural sounds. You got squirrels kind of roaming around, you have the birds, you have maybe the deer, but it's very peaceful and it's very natural. And you're probably familiar with this term, like touch grass.
Yeah.
Like if you're feeling really anxious, or I don't know, recently I've seen this used in the context of social media. Like if you're just too deep in a rabbit hole, get out and touch grass. Like for me, like going out into like my backyard, or like walking on leaves and like crunching the leaves. That's like my version of grounding, kind of more of a mental health kind of practice. That's incredibly helpful for me. So that's kind of my mental happy place, as I picture like the woods and forests and kind of like fairyland-esque.
Oh yeah.
So
what was that book? That might not be a second grade book, maybe a fourth grade book. But like it's a book where they have the imaginary world in their backyard.
The Bridge to Terabithia?
That's the one. Yeah, Bridge to Terabithia. Classic.
Yeah.
But the whole idea
that
of course. But the whole idea of being able to create with your imagination something mythical and the goodness of the forest, even in your backyard, right? Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. What about you, Father?
For me, I would say water, but I think the big thing is, and the more that I've been kind of thinking about it, is that like it's not so much the ocean, or at least by the shore, because there's still a lot of activity there, and sometimes you're just surrounded by other people running and kind of blocking your view. I think just kind of being out, maybe if it's being out on a boat, like a sailboat, just out on the water, or even just sitting by a lake, a tranquil lake. There's something that's still and unbroken, right? Yeah, there's some other things, maybe some bugs flying around, or like a fish jumping out of the water, or just some activity in the rest of the on the far shoreline. But I think just maybe it's just because we live in a suburban area. There's just always stuff. You could look at like I love what you said about the going out to the woods, because being here in Burke, there are a lot of woods, but there's also a lot of houses kind of interspersed in those woods. So you kind of look somewhere and you go, oh, that's really pretty. Oh, that's a house, right? And so everything is kind of, it's all just kind of stuffed in. Everything is just kind of here. So I think going out, seeing open water, just kind of creates an open flatness that allows my mind to just kind of empty itself a little bit. And I just appreciate that. So, I mean, and it really leads into kind of where we're at today, because as we get into the third week of Lent, things change a little bit, right? Things change a little bit. The first week we kind of have, an idea of what we're giving up for Lent and how we're entering into that moment, prayer, fasting, overcoming temptation. The second week, last week, we kind of talked about the transfiguration, talked about Jesus transformed and giving us just a little nugget about what he wants to do in the future. But today, things get a little tough. Things get a little dicey. I can only imagine what it's like. It's like Jesus goes from his happy place to maybe somebody has ruined his happy place. I don't know. Maybe somebody puts a big billboard up on Route 15 and it just kind of blocks your sight line of the mountains. Or like, some crazy revelers ruin my tranquil time at the lake because somebody decided they wanted to,
like speedboat.
go on a speedboat and zoom through.
Yeah.
So let's head in. Well, I'll read the gospel to give you guys an idea of what's going on. Today, our gospel is coming from John chapter 2. And so it's also important to remember, this is kind of right after the miracle at Cana, right? Mm-hmm. So Jesus does the miracle at Cana and kind of begins to be very public about his life. And so here we find him going to his happy place to pray, and things don't work out.
It's a great summary.
Exactly. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Since the Passover of the Jews was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, as well as the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and oxen, and spilled the coins of the money changers, and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves he said, "Take these out of here, and stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples recalled the words of Scripture, "Zeal for your house will consume me." At this, the Jews answered and said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews said, This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking about the temple of his body. Therefore, when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they came to believe the scripture and the word Jesus had spoken. While he was in Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover, many began to believe in his name when they saw the signs he was doing. But Jesus would not trust himself to them because he knew them all and did not need anyone to testify about human nature. He himself understood it well. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Whoo boy, there's a lot going on there.
Sure is.
Janet, I can only imagine what it would be like in the second grade classroom if you had to flip over a few tables because of some unruly guests.
Mm-hmm.
But what really strikes you, or what kind of sticks out to you as you read this story?
It's almost like a different side of Jesus that we're seeing, because you wouldn't see him getting upset. That's not what we are used to reading, seeing him get upset, flipping over tables, telling them to leave. And usually they're inviting him, he'll invite her to come on into my home and come here. Don't worry about it. They're sinners, where this is like the opposite. And it's kind of a different take on Jesus with this.
Exactly.
And the interesting thing is too, like where he was a teacher, and like for me as a teacher, it would be hard for me I wouldn't do that. I mean, I would find other ways to, not that I'm always happy with my children, but it's like, can be devastating to the people. They're not used to seeing this out of Jesus. And, when he says, don't take those doves out of there, those are the animals. I mean, that God made. What do you mean? It's like getting rid of God's creation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's just different, but that's part of Lent, to understand the odd things. At least it is to me sometimes.
That's a really interesting perspective.
I love that. And I think, too, I really love that, because it is a different side of Jesus. And so then the question is, do I just sit in what the kids say these days, they call it ick. Do I sit in the ick? Right? Do I sit in the uncomfortableness of that and just be like, this isn't the Jesus I know, and then kind of reject it, or kind of like maybe skip over it? Or does the fact that Jesus is going through this in this way, and we know he never does this, right? Does that suddenly give us a pause to say, well, wait a minute, why is he doing this? Right? Why is he doing this? Like, do I give him the benefit of the doubt, or do I cancel him?
Right.
It's amazing to me to think that Jesus must have been particularly upset. And I think it's not so much, I don't think we can fault the doves for this. I like you. You're right. I like what you said, because that's like, they're God's creation. They're God's creatures. And kind of going along with that, right? It's like, yeah, even the animals, the oxen and everything. But I think it really speaks to that Jesus knows the hearts of the people who are selling in the temple. Just like he knows the hearts of the people he invites, right? When he says to like the woman caught in adultery, and he really rescues her, right? And he lifts up her heart. He knows that, for her, even in spite of her sin, this is a woman worthy of love, and worthy of, and a person of dignity. And so he raises her up. But I think in the same spot, he sees these people who are following the letter of the law, right? And offering, hey, buy all of the temple oxen and stuff for your sacrifices. You can get it all right here. You didn't have to drag it from your own herds, But I think he knows their hearts, and he knows that they're only in it for the money and not for what those sacrifices represent.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Father, this kind of reminds me of a conversation we were having off record earlier about some people need some tough love.
Oh, yeah. No, that's very true.
And that's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit. And I think this also kind of reminds me a little bit of a conversation. It might have been from last year's. I don't remember which podcast it was, but it was one where we had Father Bob on, and we were talking about, I think it might have been Lent. Maybe, I can't remember. Somehow Father and I were tracking. We're like, this, I think it was Lent. We're like, we feel like this has kind of been like an emotional scourging, because that's what we needed this Lent. Him and I, whatever, we were, for some reason, we were really jiving on that analogy. And so that's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit of, sometimes we need the tables to be flipped in order for us to kind of ask the hard questions, reevaluate our priorities, and accept that tough love from the Lord.
Yeah. Janet, I can only imagine how that resonates in the second grade classroom.
It does. I mean, but sometimes, as much as it's tempting to try to, wanting to do something just to get upset, with the children, but, sometimes I just take a deep breath and I just have to remember they're little children. And as much as I want to, yes, I have to give them tough love sometimes, but it's in a way that they can learn from it. And that's the way we want them to learn, is learn from it. But at the same time, the tough love is there. And that's why I think I get a lot of respect from the children, because they know I have tough love, but I can have a lot of fun too. But as far as, just teaching them that tough love, like this is what's going to happen in life. This is life skills for you little ones. And, and I don't, of course, I would never yell at them, because I want them to know that they're loved.
Yeah.
At the school too. But, sometimes in stories like this, I have to pull away from teaching. Like, the kid will look at me like, why can't Jesus just do that? Or why can't they just do that? It's hard to teach little ones as far as what Jesus is really doing. Like, this would be a hard one to go over for the little ones. Like, whoa, Jesus is mad.
Sure.
That's the way they would see this. Of course, everyone gets upset, and, but that's hard for little ones, and sometimes us.
Yeah.
So, but
I imagine.
a couple weeks ago, I had to say, hey, my Lent's starting now, because it's like, there's just a lot of things. It's like, I just couldn't get out of a rut. I just went in my office and I said, okay, my Lent's starting now. I started journaling, just getting it out and just having that time for myself, because Lent kind of makes me do that, where I shouldn't have to wait for Lent. I should be able to do that anytime. And that's why I just said, Lent starting with me now. And so...
Yeah, and kind of taking some ownership in your own life about that and being very intentional. I think that intentionality is such a huge thing, because I like what I really appreciate what you said. Is that the kids still need to know that they're loved,
right?
Even if I need to let them know that the choice that they're making is very hurtful to the kids around them,
right?
Is very hurtful to me, is very hurtful to themselves. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that's probably the skill, right? I often use the word detachment, but the idea is that like impersonal. Not that you're apathetic towards it, because you're obviously invested, but it's not about us, right? I have to do this regularly. People will say awful things about the church or about some of their experiences or kind of what they do. And so oftentimes I need to be able to share with somebody that something that they're doing is very wrong, but I have to do it from a position of, I'm not telling you something that, ooh, I know a thing that you don't, or let me, explain some Catholic truth to you. And I don't have to do it because it's like, oh, I have to be the one that defends faith. Rather, the choice that I make 95% of the time, I'm not perfect about it, I don't think anybody is to be able to say, this at the end of the day is not about me. This is about the person and their choices, what they're doing, whether good or bad, whether harmful to themselves or helpful. And so it's not about me, whether you've offended me or done something wrong to me. It's about you're doing something that's going to lead you down a path I don't want you to go down, because I don't want to have to see you in a spot where you're at your worst. I would want to help you from that if I could.
Right.
Right. And so at the end of the day, it's not about me. And it's not about any of that. I think Jesus, this is kind of the key with this story with Jesus. Yeah, it feels very violent, but Jesus is never saying in there, like, I'm pissed off because of what you did to me. Right. He doesn't say, I'll show you what Son of God is. Right. It's not personal for him. Yeah. Right. For him, it's I think the key line in there where it's not about him is when the disciples look and say, zeal for your house consumes me, right? They recall the words of the prophet and they realize, wait a minute, this is like what was said in the prophet, where it's not about Jesus, it's about Jesus's love for his Father's house, right? Nobody likes to see vandalism or I don't know. When I was a kid, we used to draw on the walls of our house. What's that?
Like graffiti?
Yeah, graffiti. Nobody likes graffiti.
No.
But like, I certainly didn't like, I certainly loved the idea of painting my pictures on whatever canvas was presented to me. And that might be a wall. And so my mother had to find that balance between being upset that she was going to have to clean it, upset that she was going to have to figure out how to paint over beautiful crayon work, rivaling Leonardo da Vinci, versus, helping me realize that this is not going to be good, that I need to take care of the space that I live in. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine that Jesus is in a similar boat where he wants people to treat his Father's house with respect. So it turns out not to be about him.
Yeah. And this one's really interesting too, because I was debating whether or not to bring this up, but here at Nativity, we have a lot going on. And so something that this kind of reminds me of, and it just forces me to kind of take a step back and ask, the hard questions of when people walk out of the church on any given Sunday, we do have tables of people asking for things, sign-ups, please buy this. And this passage almost makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable because I know that we do that regularly. And so I have to ask myself, okay, is what we're doing regularly, is that what Jesus is fighting, or is what we're doing a good thing? And I was praying and thinking about this before we started recording. And I'm like, okay, well, what are the things that we are tabling? We're inviting people into further community. We're inviting people into service. Those are what those tables are. Mm-hmm. And if we are asking for some sort of money or donation, it's usually going to a cause that is then promoting the gospel. Because, and I also think that way too, like just kind of that mental exercise, because one of my first jobs was at the National Shrine. It was at the gift shop. And we had a customer come in. This was like, I was a student at Catholic University. And so it was a really, really great, like, on campus, quote unquote, not really on campus job. And so we had someone come in one time and they said everything in this gift shop should be free. And they were kind of referencing this passage really indirectly. And that really just made me pause. And I'm like, okay, well, these are holy things. These are statues. These are prayer cards. These are all sorts of Catholic kind of objects. That
literature and books.
Yeah. And that, it's just, as someone who works for the church, it just makes me think of, I don't know if you mentioned it in one of our podcasts, Father, or maybe just off record, of justice. And so, like, people put time and effort into, from their own craft and skills and resources, to making these objects or putting together these services, so then people can enter deeper into the faith. It's not about them. And so therefore, this is just a question that's been on my mind for like 10 years. And so
it's not only that our ministries within the church that are doing it, it's outside. Look at the pieces from the Holy Land, too. I mean, we're selling, beautiful art.
The olive wood carvings.
Right. Yeah.
But of course, when you hear one of those people give testimony,
right?
Oh, it's like heart-wrenching. And it's like, this is their only livelihood. And again, yes, that's it's about them, but it's also not about them. It's about justice. It's about life and a good life and dignity and sanctity of human person. So anyway, those are the kinds of thoughts that come immediately when I read this passage.
Well, yeah, and I think the short answer, at least from my opinion, is it's a little bit of both, right? The reason that you feel uncomfortable is because, yes, you can sort of look at a good cause, but you can also see the temptation to take it too far, right? I think one of the ones, and I love it because it's such a crazy demonstration of how invested our school is. But one of the most terrifyingly overwhelming moments is right before the school auction, when they're selling raffle tickets, and they sell raffle tickets and they bring out all the different baskets that each grade has assembled that you could win by being a part of this raffle.
Right.
And I mean, it's intense, is it not? It's a little bit of everything. I mean, it's like, massive coolers filled with anything you need for the beach, and 20 lottery, like 40 lottery tickets. I mean, it is insane, the amount of generosity. And again, it's one of those, it's such a fine line because there's something so very materialistic about it, right? But then there's also the back of your mind. It's like, okay, but what should be happening here is that the money that's raised is a way for the school and the PTO to be able to support the school and the PTO.
Right.
And I think what it is at the end of the day, we have to figure out, we can't just assume it. I don't think it's fair for the average person who's walking by to just assume it's always a good cause. I think it's the vendors, just like in Jesus' time, the vendors needed to have some soul searching, and they needed to be able to say, wait a minute, right? Am I doing this for a good cause? Or am I just interested in Girl Scout cookies? Am I just interested in, the deliciousness of a fish fry? Right. And I would say, I think Barry sees it as a mission. And I think that's I think it's a very good example of how it's done right. And then I think it's possible and a very good temptation, not a very good temptation, but a very real temptation for people to maybe go in going, I just want a booth. I want people who are coming out of Mass. I don't really necessarily worry too much about, praying or whatever. I just want to, jump on the bandwagon and sell stuff and really advance my cause.
Yeah. Cause what you have is on a given Sunday weekend is a group of a lot of people with, shared interests, common values. And as someone who works in digital marketing, that's an opportunity for temptation.
An opportunity for temptation. It's all about the heart. Yeah. Right. If my heart is, I'm here for this stuff, well, then that's the message you're going to give off. And that's the reason Jesus is overturning your table.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on the other side, it's like there is a sense of this is an opportunity to reach people coming out of church. This is an opportunity when the priest says, go in peace. Right.
Yeah. And it reminds me of something. I never had the privilege of meeting Father Richard Martin, our previous pastor. I came on board on this parish a couple years after he passed, and so. But I've heard.
His legacy lives on.
It's such a strong legacy here. And one of the things that I was told that he would say after Mass is, "The service has now ended. Service now begins." Is that accurate, Janet? Would you say?
Yes, it is, because he is encouraging the people to go out and spread the word. Tell people, be the example of what you just came from, and be the example of Jesus. And I remember a couple of times him saying, it's not just the adults that I want to do this, it's the children too. And that kind of whoa, he's talking to us.
Yeah.
Which was good because it was more including everyone into it. And Father Martin was like that. And he did. He would just say, go out there. Now, this part's finished. Continue on out into the world.
Yeah. So I think that's, and the idea of, setting up tables like in the narthex, because this is something we talk about a lot kind of in the staff, is how do you reach people? This is a question I get asked all the time, especially working in social media. How do you reach people? How do you reach people? How do you reach people? And the common answer that I hear a lot is, well, you have a lot of people that show up on Sundays, which is a huge blessing. So what do you do when they're there? So I just really love that line from Father Martin. It's like, when you're in the sanctuary, when you're in the church, focus on Mass. That is a service, that is worship, that is Jesus fully present. That is where your heart and mind should be. But then when you go out, having that opportunity to be invited to then enter deeper into service, or invited to a devotional group or a Bible study or a women's or men's group, I think that's an appropriate use of that space and of that time. And I don't think that's a table Jesus would turn over.
No. Yeah, and I think too, this is always kind of it's always been kind of an interesting thing for me. It's maybe I call it a blessing and a curse, because the blessing is, I absolutely adore the sense of community that we have at Nativity, right? And the idea that people are grateful to be able to come together. But I think one of the things that's really great that Father Bob did was he built and extended the narthex. So now there's kind of a place to go to where that community can be built and that conversation can happen. That's also out of the main sanctuary of the church. Because I think beforehand, from what I understand, you just opened the doors and you were right in the church. And so the booths were right there in the church. And so when Mass ended, it was very hard for somebody to, or I should say maybe it was a very harsh transition to go from the worship in the church to general loud conversation and no chance to kind of like make a Thanksgiving or spend some time in that. Just like, I always think of that one leper that returns to Jesus to just offer him worship. Everybody else goes off and celebrates, and that's fine. But what about that one that wanted to just come back and spend some time in that moment? And so now we kind of have, I don't want to say it's a division, but it really is a natural flow from being in the worship of the church to being able to then talk outside, right? And it's nice to have that kind of space.
That's the transition from one place to another. And not only that, for like to respect those who want to stay back and pray, transition into where you want to be with the community, to talk and, have the fellowship. And I think people not live on that, but just rely on that every Sunday. Because myself, besides my own students and the families, I love coming to church to see certain people every week. It's like when they're not there, it's like, well, what's going on? Why are they here? So I think that fellowshipness is huge here at Nativity, and it comes from the altar.
That makes sense. And what a great way to reflect then on this, to be able to think that in my Lenten celebration, in my time of Lent, there's sacrifice and there's a certain solemnity, but always with an idea of what is my intention here? I'm not just giving up chocolate for the sake of giving up chocolate. I'm not just promising to do something for the sake of doing more, right? Adding another thing. I'm asking myself about the intention of the work that I am doing. When I'm in the church, am I focused on being with the Lord? When I'm with the community, am I trying to bring Christ to the community? And I imagine that this message today is a really good kind of cautionary tale about what happens if we, get a little too focused on the stuff, right? And that there's a sense of a detachment. Good reminder to us, like, what's the thing that you are detaching in your life?
Yeah, I really like that, like a cautionary tale. And that's also brought up a good, like, if I know we're like knee deep into Lent, it's the third week, but if listeners, you're interested in adding something else, a kind of unique Lenten penance is trying your hardest not to daydream during Mass. Like mental discipline during worship, during the sacraments would be really introspective and challenging Lenten penance that I think would be a really interesting one.
I can't tell you the number of times people come up to me, even with the little ones, and they're so precious, but it's so hard for little ones to have their attention at Mass. It can be very difficult. It can be very difficult across the board, but at the same time, there is a grace in being able to be present with the Lord. And that doesn't mean that I'm locked in the whole time. If I'm distracted, do I turn back to the Lord, or do I just throw it up and say, whatever, right? I think those distractions are good examples of like the doves and the oxen and the, and the sheep. They're just, the thing that I could bring to the Lord and refocus and say, Lord, take this from me as like a little sacrifice, like a dove or an ox or a sheep. But then the other thing is it could be just this distraction that's keeping me from honoring the Lord as a house, and the place as a house of prayer.
And of course, my mind often goes to, whenever I think of distractions at Mass, I can't remember which priest it was that said this. It may not have even been a nativity priest, but basically just like reassuring parents with young children that, we know you guys have your hands full. Like, we know you by definition are distracted, but if you can focus for just a few minutes, and just try to be present, like mentally, and spiritually in the Mass, then that's great. That's okay. Just the fact that you are there in person, like you got all the kids out of the house, and I know we've mentioned this in other podcasts before, but like when I say focusing at Mass, I mean distractions from my own brain, like not people that I'm in charge of.
What am I having for lunch?
Literally, yeah, that's exactly it. Or like, my biggest temptation, and try not to work while being at Mass. And for me, I have such a unique job that on Sundays when I come for Mass, I am multitasking. I've made that a part of my work, got a live stream the 11 o'clock Mass, and I choose to take, professional quality photos to then share on social media because those literally reach thousands of people a week. And I've made that a part of my ministry. But when it's not a Sunday, and if I'm not working, then having my phone away from me, or even at my own home parish, this is easier. And really, just like you're saying, Father, detach. Like, don't keep reaching for it. Don't be tempted to take a picture. Like, it's okay. That's such a me kind of problem, but that's what I mean by that, like, mental discipline. And Lent is just a really great time just to be aware of those habits, even if they're not necessarily bad habits, but just those habits, so then we can redirect back to the Lord.
Redirect. So, Janet, this kind of brings us to a good kind of final thought.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of advice, or maybe for our wonderful listeners, just imagining our listeners are kind of like those little second graders. How do you help keep second graders on task? How do you help keep them, maybe flowing with the distractions, as of not just resisting distractions, but how do you help them overcome that and kind of get focused on whatever is necessary?
Well, in the general fashion, a lot of times I'll just gently tap on their desk, point to the paper, like, this is where you need to be, or tapping on the shoulder and just giving a nod, so it's not distracting others as I'm trying to get the one child back on task, but just, letting them learn on their own. And as far as learning what their boundaries are too, I know if I can look at a child, they're whispering to someone because they can't wait to get to recess. And then I'll wait. But a lot of times children have learned too that they come back to work because they know the expectation. And I think that is a big word here in the church, the expectations, that we know what's coming and what's going. And, of course, little ones, they can't wait to get out to recess. But it's like you just keep reviewing with them. Look, I said, we'll get out to recess, but we need to do this first. You need to get this completed. So I think it's just, and there's so much in this Catholic Church, even though we hear the same readings, it's a review of what our faith is, kind of like reviewing of what they know what they're supposed to be doing. So.
I love that, because I love the idea that it's easier to enter into worship when I know what it is that God expects of me in worship. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we talk about that enough. We always talk about the idea that, and it's still true, right, that you come as you are, right? That the Lord is happy that you're there. But I think we get the idea that his expectation is just, that I'm here. And that may be what I'm able to give him today, but the expectation from the Lord is not that I'm perfect and I sound like an altar boy or like a choir of angels or whatever when I sing, or, that I have a liturgical sense and have a master's degree in theology. I think the expectation is that we recognize that the Lord gives us his heart, and what the Lord expects of us is for us to give him ours. And if we're in that spot, if we're locked in that idea, and I think this comes directly from your second graders, right? Because they are willing to give you their all because they know, right, that you are all in for them. That if you're disciplining them, it's out of love. If you're giving them a homework assignment, it's out of love. If you're teaching them, it's because you love them.
My phrase in the class is, I fuss at you because I love you. I make you do this because I love you. If I didn't love you, you wouldn't become a better person. You wouldn't, be a better friend to someone else. So it's interesting how that tie. And the other thing I wanted to say is too, sometimes we don't think that they're on the right track, but then they show us no, they know the expectation. And when they, or they're daydreaming or something, then they come back and just say something out of the blue. Like a few weeks ago when the relic was here. Yeah. When the gospel for that particular school mass was healing the blind, healing the deaf person, and making the person talk. And right away, the kids turn around and says, well, that's St. Jude, isn't it? Is that St. Jude working? I'm like, wow.
Surprise,
I don't
surprise.
think you listen to the gospel every Friday, but because it's Friday afternoon or Friday morning going in the weekend. But I think kids, again, I think they know a lot more than what we think they do. And they can be a very good example to us, especially during Lent.
Well, and I think everything you just said is great advice for us and for our listeners, because that's exactly what it is, right? God fusses at us because he loves us.
Right.
He puts us through difficult things and makes us do Lent and stuff like that is because he loves us, right?
Yeah.
Not because he has a weird desire to have us be tortured over not eating chocolate or Chick-fil-A or whatever, but because he actually wants us to become a better person. Yeah, or bacon. I would never give that up for Lent. No, but I think it really is a beautiful thing. And I think the Lord delights when we pleasantly surprise him, right? When we realize that we knew something that we didn't think we could do, or we were able to overcome something that we didn't think was possible, right? I really do oftentimes see the comparison, and it's really why we call God our Father, right? God is our Father. He looks at us like his beloved children. And I think, friends, we can learn a lot from our dear second graders.
Absolutely.
Mary, any plugs?
I don't know if we've shouted him out yet, but maybe he's the first person that came to mind. Maybe we could shout out our new parochial vicar, Father Bennett. This is his first Lent as a priest, not just with us, but so feel free to feel him in your prayers. And people, they have their milestones in life, but then religious have their milestones in their kind of religious vocation, and so this will be this is his first Lent as our nativity priest, and this will also be his first Holy Week and first Triduum, leading us in that. So it's just, I don't know why that just came to me, but yeah, so, a shout out to Father Bennett. He's doing a great job so far in his first year, and we're so grateful, for his vocation, for his yes to his service to our parish family.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you happen to see him, ask him for his first year priestly blessing. He's allowed. Yeah, it's a thing. You're allowed to give a first blessing for as long as you were a baby priest. And he's still got a couple months left, so don't be afraid to ask him for that blessing. I think it's just really special because those little guys are about to receive First Communion and First Confession. And so he'll be going through First Communion and First Confession with those little ones for him for the first time. I remember my first time as a priest where apparently what was relayed to me later was that one kid, I gave them 3 Our Fathers, and they walked out and they burst into tears. And the director of religious education was very upset, thinking, I don't know this new priest. I wonder what he did. What could he possibly have done to make this little kid upset? And so she walked over to him and said, is everything okay? And he's just, no. I was like, well, what's wrong? I was like, well, Father gave me 3 Our Fathers. And she's like, well, what's wrong with that? But I only know one.
Oh, that is very common in kids. Unless you explain it to them.
Very specific.
Right. But I had that once on the Hail Marys,
Yeah, I only know one. Well, just say it 3 times and you'll be just fine. So, friends, we tell you guys this all the time, but the best way to get a hold of us the best way to share us is to tell word of mouth. Tell your friends about us. Tell us how wonderful and mathematically inaccurate we are. Tell us, let us know what kind of a job we've done. Like and subscribe, of course. But most especially, if you found this helpful for you, be sure to share it with somebody you might find that it's helpful for them as well. And we are so grateful. Janet, we're so grateful to have you on board. Tell Barry we love him, and we're grateful for him as well.
I kind of love him too.
Yeah, just a little bit.
No, thank you for having me. This was a great experience and wonderful to share with both of you.
All right.
Thank you for inviting me.
Same thing. Same. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get you back on. And until then, friends, like, subscribe, and tell a friend.
And have a great third week of Lent. You're in our prayers, and please pray for us.